There's a question that doesn't get asked enough in rugby. Not about the best team, or the best player, or even the best strategy. It's simpler than that. It's this: why does one nation keep making the same mistake over and over again? The Springboks have a system. You've heard about it. The bomb squad. 7 forwards on the bench, sometimes 6, all built like trucks, all ready to enter the game when legs are tired and lungs are burning. It's not subtle. It's not a secret. Every coach in World Rugby knows it's coming. And yet there's one team that acts like they've never seen it before, every single time. Italy has faced South Africa more times than most people realize. Different coaches, different eras, different players wearing the blue jersey. The results? Almost identical. The pattern? Embarrassingly predictable. First half, competitive, sometimes even promising. Second half, complete collapse. Other nations figured it out. Some found ways to compete. Some even found ways to win. Ireland worked it out. France developed counter strategies. New Zealand adjusted their game plan. England built their own version. But Italy? They're still standing there watching fresh Springbok forwards pour onto the field around the 50-minute mark. And they look surprised, like it's the first time it's ever happened. So here's the real question. Is Italy the only team left that genuinely hasn't figured this out? Let's talk about what the bomb squad actually is, because if you're going to understand why Italy keeps failing, you need to understand what they're failing against. Traditional rugby substitutions were about replacing injured players or giving someone a rest. You'd bring on a decent backup, hope they could maintain the standard, and try to see out the game. South Africa looked at that concept and asked a different question. What if we don't maintain the standard? What if we raise it? The bomb squad flips the entire idea of bench management. Instead of your starting pack being your strongest and your bench being weaker backups, you split your forward power evenly. Your starting 8 are world class. Your finishing 8 are also world class. Sometimes they're even bigger, angrier and fresher than the players they're replacing. This does 2 things simultaneously. First, it maintains absolute physical intensity for the full 80 minutes. While other teams are managing tired bodies and slowing down, the Springboks are accelerating. Second, and this is crucial, it breaks the opposition mentally. You spend 40 minutes getting battered by monsters. You survive. You think you've weathered the storm. Then 6 more monsters arrive, and they're angrier than the first batch. The psychological impact cannot be overstated. Defenders who've been making tackles for 50 minutes suddenly have to face completely fresh legs. Forwards who've been scrummaging and rucking are now up against players who just finished their warm-up. It's not just physical tiredness. It's the knowledge that no matter how hard you work, the next wave is coming, and they haven't worked at all yet. Other teams saw this and adapted. They developed deeper benches. They focused on fitness protocols that could sustain intensity. They changed their tactical approach, trying to build big leads early or slow the game down to reduce the impact of fresh legs. They trained specifically for the moment when the bomb squad arrives. Italy saw this and, well, we'll get to that. But first, you need to understand just how consistent their failure has been. Here's where it gets uncomfortable if you're Italian. Because this isn't about one bad game or one unlucky result. This is about a pattern so consistent, you could set your watch by it. Pick any Italy versus South Africa match from the last 15 years. Doesn't matter which one. The story is almost always the same. Italy starts with energy, sometimes real belief. They defend their line. They complete their sets. They stay in the game. 20 minutes in, 30 minutes in, sometimes even at halftime, the scoreboard looks respectable. Commentators start talking about Italy's improvement, their competitiveness, their potential. Then the second half starts, and around minute 50 to 60, it happens. The Springbok substitutions begin, fresh forwards enter the game, and Italy's entire structure begins to crack. It doesn't happen all at once. That's almost what makes it worse. It's gradual, like watching a building slowly collapse. First, the tackles start getting missed by centimeters instead of being dominant hits. Then the rucks start being lost by Italy instead of being competed for equally. Then the scrum, which held firm for 45 minutes, suddenly starts going backwards. By minute 65, Italy looks like a completely different team. Not because they're playing badly necessarily, but because they're playing exhausted rugby against opponents who just started their shift. The scoreboard, which was close at halftime, suddenly becomes a blowout. Tries start coming in bunches. The Springboks find space that wasn't there 20 minutes earlier. The Italian defensive line, which was organized and committed, now has gaps appearing. By minute 75, it's not really a contest anymore. It's a demonstration. And the most frustrating part, everyone watching knows exactly why it's happening. The commentators say it, the opposing coaches know it, even the Italian players probably know it. Somewhere in their exhausted minds, the bomb squad happened. Again, just like it always does, just like everyone knew it would. And yet, match after match, year after year, Italy seems unable to prepare for something they know is absolutely, definitely, 100% coming. It's like watching someone get surprised by their own birthday every single year. So why did other teams figure it out when Italy couldn't? What's the difference between a nation that adapts and one that keeps repeating the same mistakes? Let's look at Ireland first. When Ireland faced the bomb squad problem, they didn't just complain about it being unfair or overwhelming. They studied it. They recognized that South Africa's strategy required them to match intensity for longer periods. So Ireland invested in depth. They developed a club system that produced forwards capable of playing at international intensity. They built fitness programs specifically designed to sustain performance into the final 20 minutes. They created their own version of squad rotation that meant their bench could genuinely compete with South Africa's substitutes. They recognized they couldn't match South Africa's pure physical size across the full squad, so they focused on pace and tempo. The French strategy against the bomb squad became about stretching the game wide, moving the ball quickly and trying to build significant leads before the South African substitutes could impact the game. They also developed their own powerful forward options, creating genuine competition in the set piece that meant even when fresh Springbok forwards arrived, France wasn't automatically dominated. Again, not a perfect solution. France still loses to South Africa regularly, but they made it a genuine contest instead of an inevitable collapse. New Zealand's solution was perhaps the most New Zealand thing possible. They basically said, fine, if you're going to bring on massive forwards, we'll bring on absurdly skilled athletes who can exploit tired defensive structures. The All Blacks built a bench that could capitalize on the exact moment when the opposition was focused on surviving the Springbok power game. They turned the bomb squad from a one-sided advantage into a two-way problem. Even smaller nations found ways to compete. Scotland focused on game management, trying to control possession and slow the game down to reduce the number of high-intensity collisions. Japan prioritized fitness to the point where their players could maintain pace even against fresh opponents. Argentina, being in the same rugby championship as South Africa, essentially had no choice but to develop their own version of powerful forward depth. Italy keeps showing up like it's the first time they've encountered the problem, and that's what makes this so baffling. So what's actually going wrong? Why can't Italy solve a problem that everyone else at least attempted to address? The answer isn't simple, and it's probably not what you think. This isn't about Italian players being less talented or less committed. Anyone who watches these players perform for their clubs knows they're quality rugby players. This isn't about coaching incompetence either. Italy has hired good coaches, experienced coaches who've succeeded elsewhere. Italian coaches know their bench is weaker than their starting pack, so they try to keep their starters on the field as long as possible, which means those starters are absolutely exhausted by the time the Springbok bomb squad arrives, which makes the impact of those fresh South African forwards even more devastating. Compare that to how South Africa approaches the same situation. Springbok coaches can substitute their entire front row at minute 50 and genuinely upgrade their power. They're not managing decline, they're deploying fresh weapons. Italy's coaches are desperately trying to delay the inevitable moment when their tired starters have to be replaced by less capable backups. There's also a mentality issue that's harder to quantify but impossible to ignore. Italy has been the Six Nations underdog for so long that there's an acceptance of certain defeats. When Italy faces France or England, there's belief they can win. When Italy faces South Africa, there seems to be an unspoken acknowledgement that survival and respectability are the realistic goals. That mentality becomes self-fulfilling. You can't solve the bomb squad problem if you've already decided it's unsolvable. The financial reality makes everything harder too. Italy can't invest in the rugby infrastructure the way South Africa or France can. They can't pay players to stay in Italy instead of going to wealthier leagues. They can't afford the same level of sports science, coaching depth, or facility quality. So while other nations were building solutions to the bomb squad problem, Italy was still trying to build basic competitive structures. None of this is meant as an excuse. Plenty of nations with fewer resources have found ways to compete. But it explains why Italy seems stuck in this loop, unable to break free from a pattern everyone can see. So back to the original question, is Italy the only team that still can't handle the bomb squad? The honest answer is probably yes. Other teams might struggle with it, might lose to it, might find themselves overwhelmed by it on occasion, but they've all developed some kind of strategic response. They've all adapted their approach in some meaningful way. Italy remains the one major rugby nation that faces the bomb squad the same way they did a decade ago. Hope to compete for 40 minutes, then try to survive the final 40. It's not a strategy, it's a pattern of inevitable decline. And the worst part? Number one knows it's coming. South African coaches know that if they keep the game close through 50 minutes, they'll dominate the finish. Italian players know that around minute 60, everything will get harder. Supporters know that promising first-half performances will probably end in familiar second-half disappointment. Knowledge without action is just frustration, and Italy has been frustrated for a very long time. Can this change? Theoretically, yes. Italy could invest heavily in forward development. They could build depth through their domestic system. They could hire coaches specifically focused on solving this exact problem. They could make beating South Africa a genuine strategic priority instead of just another game on the calendar. Will it change? That's the real question, and based on 15 years of evidence, the answer seems increasingly unlikely. Because solving the bomb squad problem requires resources, commitment, and time. It requires a nation to fundamentally restructure how they develop forwards and manage game intensity. It requires belief that the problem is solvable. Italy hasn't shown they possess any of those things. They've shown they can compete for 40 minutes. They've shown they have talented individuals. They've shown they can execute game plans against certain opponents. But they haven't shown they can solve the bomb squad. And until they do, they'll remain the answer to a question nobody wants to be associated with. Which team still hasn't figured this out? The evidence suggests it's just them now. That's enough. And that's not going to change anytime soon.